to this recording on trusts. I'm Barbara Gardner from Technical Connection. The title of today's recording is, Do You Still Need That Trust? Many advisors will be visiting their clients these days, especially those clients who have trusts, talking about trust registration service and what needs to be done. Many clients will obviously need assistance with these matters. As part of this chat with your client about trust, you should be carrying out a review of any existing trust. Why were the trusts set up in the first place? Is the purpose of the trust still valid, or perhaps it's no longer necessary? Unfortunately, even if the trust is not necessary and it can be terminated or closed, in other words, according to HMRC, such a trust, if it was in existence on or after 6th of October 2020, needs to be registered on TRS, but then it can be immediately deregistered. Now, today I want to talk about one particular type of trust, and frequently such a trust is actually not going to be necessary. This trust has actually been described by the consumer magazine Which as one of the financial products that you don't need, alongside with PPI and extended warranties. Now, that may not necessarily be true in all cases, but in many cases, it will actually be true. The trust I'm talking about is called lifetime trust or family trust or asset protection trust. And it's a sort of trust that individual will set up generally with the hope of avoiding having to pay nursing home fees. Now, some of the marketing literature alongside those trusts, because they generally have been marketed heavily by sometimes will writing agencies, sometimes financial advisors or solicitors, they may not necessarily directly refer to nursing home fees, but many actually have in the past. And even if they don't, that's generally the principal reason why people would set up this trust. As I said, mostly it will be your principal residence, your home, that will go into this trust, but sometimes also other assets, including cash and investments. Now, one example of problems with such a trust was recently highlighted in BBC Radio 4's Moneybox program, where a couple, brother and sister, inherited a estate of the dad after he had died. And they found that the home, which they thought they were inheriting, was in fact in one of those trusts held by the firm of solicitors as trustees. So it wasn't as simple as that to get the property into their names. The father set up the trust, hoping again that he will avoid having to pay nursing home fees. In fact, he never needed to pay any fees. He never went into care. And having paid something like £3,000 or £4,000 to set up the trust, because this is what generally these arrangements cost, the brother and sister then found out that if they wanted to close the trust, the solicitors were asking for £700 plus VAT to actually terminate the trust. So obviously they weren't very happy. The whole thing turned out to be a waste of money and a lot of inconvenience. Now, for nursing home fees, most people will know that, in fact, if you transfer your property into such a trust, then it is likely to be treated as deliberate deprivation, and it's not going to achieve your objective. It also doesn't do anything for inheritance tax or any other taxes. Indeed, it may cause potential problems, because since 2006, setting up such a trust would have inheritance tax consequences. It would have been a chargeable lifetime transfer, gift with reservation of benefit, potential periodic and exit charges, etc. So all sorts of potential difficulties. Now, it may or may not be possible to terminate a trust without immediate tax implications. So obviously, individual circumstances will have to be verified. If it's possible to terminate the trust because actually there is no need for it anymore, then perhaps that's what should be done. If it's not possible or not sensible to terminate the trust because of perhaps potential CGT implication on termination of trust during lifetime, then at least there is a possibility of asking the professional trustees to retire or potentially remove by the settlor if the trust deed allows for this to happen. So at least the family is going to be in control of the trust. Now, the high fees that used to be charged for this trust were justified by the providers on the basis that they would act as trustees and they would deal with all the admin, etc. Obviously, if it's just a house in the trust and the settlor is still living there and nothing much else is happening, then trustees wouldn't have anything else to do. So no trust expenses. Now, of course, these firms, finding out they may have hundreds of trusts on their books, and they have to deal with trust registration service and the registration of the trust with HMRC. So they may be more amenable to resigning and perhaps even terminating the trust. So there may be other trusts that people have set up that may not be necessary or needed anymore. So in all cases, when discussing trusts with clients, ask what sort of trust arrangements they have. If the trust consists not just of a home, but perhaps cash or investments, then there should be a proper review carried out whether these are the right investments, and perhaps they need to be rearranged with the view of providing better growth. That's all for today. Thank you for listening.